Hello and welcome back to Crossroads of Cognizance, the place where we talk about all trendy things, physical, metaphysical, spiritual, and do a lot of comparisons between what we see as healers and guides and what's going on the East Coast, what's going on the West Coast, and everything in between. Sometimes there's trends. Sometimes we're just in here laughing and cackling like old witches, having a good time. So, with that in mind, if this is your first time on the broadcast, make sure you like, subscribe, and for our Facebook folks, because we're broadcasting to both Facebook and YouTube at this time. If you want to participate, if you really want us to see your comments, you're going to have to click that video. And so we can know you're here because we won't see it otherwise if it's shared somewhere. And YouTubers, you guys have been a little quiet. Why don't we hear from you guys too? Questions, comments, shared experiences, we love them all. And so that brings us to our introduction. Again, if this is your first time catching us, I am Dahlia over here on the East Coast, holding down the fort at Crossroads of Cognizance. I'm in my healing space right now, trying to catch all the good vibes that I can. Here I serve my community through healings, readings, and great conversations. Really, I mean that's how it starts. So, but I have a lovely counterpart. So let's hear from her.
Hi, everybody. My name is Katrina Rasbold. I am part owner of um, Crossroads Metaphysical Store in Shingle Springs, California. We specialize in all types of cleansings, Reiki healing, readings, and retail as well. We also have a full line of classes that we teach both online and in person. And so I'm holding down the West Coast, and we have quite a show for you today. I think it's something that is a topic that people are very interested in right now. And so we're excited to get on with that.
So today, guys, you guys have been seeing us use cards more recently in the show. In last, I'd say probably in the last month, we've used cards maybe twice, and they seem like this mystical tool that, well, how do they get the answers, and how do you get the accuracy, and all of that, and you know, maybe today is the day that we demystify this. So we thought we would take a stab at talking about tarot and oracle cards and a couple of other cards that allow us to kind of get the answers that we can in our healing practices, in our um, intuitive practices as well. Everybody on the planet has their own level of intuition, and sometimes it can be helpful and create a more dynamic experience to have visual picture references, or interesting things fall out of a deck of cards in a way that um, you know you might see. Bibliomancy is one of my favorites to do. That's another way to kind of get some sort of random inspiration, and so it works the same as putting your finger in a book, opening it up, and having an answer laid out before you. They're actually on a random topic. There are actually some books built that way. They're oracle books. But cards are another tool that we can use to access higher guidance, or even um, you know information that we may not have had access to previously, such as certain topics like tarot cards, oracle cards. They all cover different subjects, even though there may be a consistent system without throughout. And so if you're not well versed on history, but you happen to have a deck that is historically based, you may get some really interesting answers in terms of past lives or soul journeys. I mean, it goes really deep. So, with this topic at hand, it's probably a good place to start with the basics. What are they, and what is the difference? So, Katrina, do you have something that you commonly tell your students? I know I do.
I do, I love the history of the tarot and I love teaching about that. I actually have a six-part tarot class that's in my online store that covers some of the bullet points. You could spend so much time talking about tarot. And I started reading in 1983. And so I'm coming up on 40 years of being a reader. I wrote a book called Tarot for Real People, and that covers a lot of what's in the class that I teach as well. My first deck was the older sister of this, and that was just the basic at the time called the Rider Waite deck.
Mm,
And a lot of people learned to read on Rider Waite's after we had Rider Waite for probably close to, I'd say, 20 years or so on the market, readily available. We started having other incarnations like the Universal Tarot, which are the Universal Rider Waite, which had a different kind of completed the pictures a little bit more than the original artwork. This is the Radiant. It does the same thing, but
mm,
it's the same basic pictures. And these were drawn by a very interesting woman of color who's also lesbian, Pamela Coleman Smith. And they're called the Rider Waite deck because Arthur Waite wrote the book for it. He didn't do the artwork, but he wrote the book, and it was published by the Rider Publishing Company.
mm.
And so these are the standard. And the reason that I call these the standard and teach from this perspective is that there are literally thousands of decks out there based on these exact pictures.
Yep.
The characters might look different, the colors might be different, but the individual images, the 78 images that make up the illustrated deck, have, for instance, the magician in the same position, the fool in the same position. It's a take on these specific pictures. And I like to, in my book and in my class, break down what the colors mean, what the numerology means, how do all these cards come together. But Rider Waite is your go to. And I always tell people if you start learning on the Rider Waite, you can then unlock any of those thousands of decks
Absolutely.
that are based on the Rider Waite deck. And I never recommend that people start out with a really complex or esoteric deck. I really like to get the foundation down with Rider Waite, and then you're okay. Now, one of the challenges is that before Rider Waite and concurrently with Rider Waite, we had a lot of decks where only the major arcana, which is 23 cards, was actually illustrated with pictures of what was going on to depict the meaning. They would just have 6 wands, they would just have 7 cups, and you had to know what that meaning was without any visual props. But with Rider Waite, they really started the process of showing us fully illustrated decks that give you a visual prompt for what the actual card means. So that's my long way of saying that when I start teaching people, I like them to begin with the Rider Waite so that they have a great foundation of where the tarot came from and can have access to all those other decks interpretations. Even if the book has different interpretations, you'll still be able to use the classic tarot interpretations for other decks if you know Rider Waite.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I would say that I also try to get folks to do the Rider Waite as well. It's what I think I may have had one deck before the Rider Waite, and then getting into the Rider Waite, it is sort of like you said, it completed the picture. And I was here because one of the decks that I have is that's an interpretation other than the what did we use, the Alleyman's Tarot the other day,
Mm-hmm.
is the Light Seers Tarot.
I
It
love Light Seers. I really
one of
do.
my favorites. I was trying to find the magician in here because I mean the cards are just, they're so interesting. Um, but like you said, it's a system. I think a lot of folks that I meet, I think, feel like the tarot is difficult because how do you memorize everything? And one of the ways that I'll teach alongside, just that there are common themes throughout is the application of life. The major arcana is built up of archetypes. So if, going through that by itself, you can find people in your life that are exactly what that card describes, if not yourself, or you could find those parts of your personality in yourself. So you had on the back of the Rider Waite card, you had the magician, and this is what it
Mm-hmm.
is in the Light Seers deck. You still have the robed figure, You still have an element of magic and mystery, and the elements are covered in sort of the signs and the symbols down here, and the elements are covered in the original magician's card by the symbology of the wands and the cups and the pentacles and the sword. So, you know, what we're looking at here, like Katrina said, is it's all, patterns and different things, and um, the dynamics of the tarot versus the oracle are we can expand. You have what those colors traditionally mean, and then you have what they mean to you. And that's one of the other things that I love about this, is that people think, just to dispel some difficulties, people think that the colors and the meanings will always be the same. But you may find that when you ask the question, you get a different tone, you get a different feel. Like maybe that red goes from being super grounding to pain, and because it's so glaring, and just that's the definition that fits, whatever your question is. So
One of the things that I tell people when they say that the tarot is difficult is this is nothing at all other than a language.
right.
You're learning a whole different language. And so you have to employ the same amount of dedication to learning the tarot as you would to learning Spanish or learning German or learning French or any other language. So the nice thing is that Rider Waite becomes our Latin, on which a lot of languages are based, and in this case, a lot of decks are based. And where you were showing your different ones, this is the Fool card. And in one of my favorite decks that I literally read exclusively from for over 20 years, the Morgan Greer, this is what the Fool looks like. So you can see that there's a real similarity.
Absolutely.
But still, it's a unique way of expressing that same card. So this is the Magician in the tarot, or in the Rider Waite. This is the Magician in Morgan Greer.
And they use similar colors, so that's
they kept the same color schemes. They kept the same positioning, one hand up, one hand down. They kept the same idea of all of the suits are represented on the table. You've got a cup, a sword, and a pentacle on the table, indicating that the magician has got everything at their disposal that they need.
absolutely.
So, that's what I was talking about, where they keep a similar approach to some of the artwork that's in there. But exactly as you were saying, there are, especially in the last 10 years, decks that have gotten very creative in their expression of the different 78 cards. Now, another thing that comes up that's different is the traditional suits are wands, swords, pentacles, and cups. And then you've got the major arcana as well. And some of the decks will trade out different things for those suits.
Yep.
And you have to kind of imagine what your equation is. For instance, baskets might be cups, or the Four of Earth might be the Four of Pentacles, and
the five of feathers may be sword, because it has to do with air.
Another switch that they often do, there's two I can think of. One is that some decks will switch strength and justice, which are number 8 and number 9. And they'll change the numbers out on those so that justice becomes number 8 and strength becomes number 11, which is a little bit confusing to me, but that's one thing that happens. And that and the change out of the suits is also really common. Those are the two things I can think of right away that are most often changed.
So, it gets very creative. Colleen asked a really great question as far as the tarot. I'm assuming that's what she's referencing. Isn't it just telling a story? Now, just to be difficult, everything's telling a story. Literally everything. Even us right now, we're telling a story. But yes, the tarot is telling a story from start to finish in the major arcana, and then in the minor arcana, you get the details. You get, okay, yes, the fool started on this journey, but immediately ran into the Five of Wands and had to defend
Mhm.
himself. As soon as he stepped off that cliff, he was fighting for his life, or something like that.
So, exactly. And what I tell people when I do a tarot reading for them is we're freezing a moment in time and
Yeah.
looking in the window at what it is. And so every reading is freezing a moment in time for that fool, so to speak, and saying, what is the fool, meaning the person, encountering right now? What are they seeing right now? So it becomes a message that is relevant to the question that's asked or to their situation.
Sorry, I was trying to get the comments here.
Mm.
So when it comes to the tarot, and that moment in time, one of the things that I will tell people is this is a great opportunity to, like, if you hear something that you don't like, or if you hear something concerning, rather than being trapped in that space, make a different decision. And I think we've talked about that on the show before. Like,
Certainly.
you what the ways of old were, you go to the reader, they tell you you're doomed, and you buy
Mhm.
something, or there is no problem solving it. But the world that we live in is so much more free, and we have so much more choice. And I think just the evolution of mankind has made those choices more accessible, and the fulfillment of those choices happens a lot faster. And so there's a lot of opportunity to use the tarot not only as a storyteller, but as an everyday guide. Pulling a card a day helps you learn that Latin. And then if you are trying to source out feelings, but you're not sure how to get into your body, or what the first step might be, before you ask about the person that you're dealing with, ask about yourself. What's at the root of my feelings? What's going on inside of me? What started this trigger?
Mhm.
And see where it takes you. And with a question like that, what started this trigger? I actually like using the Lenormand deck. Um,
I do too. There's a lot I use Lenormand for. I would say I use it now more often than I use tarot
yeah,
because
absolutely.
it's so direct. Just immediately your answer is there.
So the Lenormand deck is a French deck that consists of people more so than, so like the tarot has your court cards, and those could be people, but they could also be influences. Your Lenormand deck plays no games. It is straightforward. When it says, strength, it really means strength. When it says the house, it means the house. When it says the lady, so this is interesting. In that's the bluebird
Mm-hmm.
Lenormand, right? So in
Right.
that deck, when I use it, it has two ladies in it.
A
And,
lot of them do, I've noticed.
oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And so with that, there's
And
an
they're all
opportunity.
Caucasian. That's unsettling when I do readings for using Lenormand. I have a couple decks that are multicultural, multi-ethnic, and I prefer those much more than the Bluebird, which is just a bunch of white people in there.
Well, I mean, it's a
French.
European deck.
Right.
So, how diverse can it be, really? But
Right.
like with the two ladies, I will, like, if the younger lady appears, I tend to ascribe her to people born 1980 or later. And the older woman, it'll be 1979 or before. And it's really given a lot of insight as far as, like, when people are asking questions about what is it about this relationship that I need to heal, or what is it about this situation that I'm being influenced by. And we have like maybe some influences from older like from mom, or from grandparent, we can
Mm,
start to have conversation like, okay, well, you may be looking for the energy of an older person in this scenario. Or, I mean, it can even get into past lives when you're able to ascribe certain meanings. And I want to be transparent and saying those are meanings that I ascribe. That's not necessarily how you use the deck. So Colleen has a question here. Love the participation, guys. With Lenormand, is it similar to reading tarot? Also, is it hard to learn? I learned from Katrina, so I'm gonna let her answer
mhm.
that question.
I learned very quickly. I had come across Lenormand cards back probably 6 or 7 years ago,
Mhm.
and I got them into my shop up in Roseville, of the other shop, that not the one that we're in now, and I didn't love them. I looked at them and just didn't feel a connection. I had trouble getting any type of cohesive read from them, so I just sold them out and didn't reorder. And when we were in lockdown for COVID, we were closed for 3 months. I decided I wanted to learn something altogether new, so I took a class on Udemy on from one of my favorite teachers there on Lenormand, and loved it right away. So
Mm.
once I found out how to use it, it was very easy to learn. The people that I have taught, which has been, I think I've run about 5 or 6 Lenormand classes in the last couple of years, and the people there picked it up very, very quickly. However, it is also like tarot in that it's a language.
Mm.
It's a very like you were saying, it's a very direct, a very brutal conversation that you're going to have. It doesn't pull any punches. And you have to learn that language separate and apart from the tarot. So to learn Lenormand, you need to forget everything you know about tarot, because
Yeah.
they one has nothing to do with the other except their cards. That's the only thing they have in common.
And right, even down to the size, because most of your Lenormand decks are going to be baby cards, which makes them a pill to shuffle sometimes. But they're a lot of fun. I mean, I after seeing Katrina work with them, I will say, and when I say I learned from her, I didn't get an opportunity to take a class, but I did get to, just the way that she was explaining. And as soon as she said they were direct, because I was having the same sort of a bumpy road with them getting into the cards. As soon as she said they're direct, they're not like the tarot, the meanings are going to be different, I switched off and I was like, oh, perfect. Okay. So now let's approach these. And now there are more expanded Lenormand decks, just like there are now more expanded tarot decks as well. Like,
Correct.
last week we were talking about the Alleyman's Tarot that has like 100, 130 plus cards in
Mhm.
it when the tradition is 78. So,
Colleen, excuse me, I'm sorry, Colleen and Elsbeth. Um, yes, um, the online class that I used was one on Udemy. It's Astrid the Witch who taught it. However, the first class that I offer, once the store closes down and I start doing the online classes. I think one of the first classes is going to be a class on Lenormand.
very cool.
So that's going to be streaming very soon. What I recommend that you do is bookmark crossroadsoccult.com. No spaces, no lines, just crossroadsoccult.com. And I'll be announcing on there the classes as they come up. And so right now I'm really looking at a Lenormand class because it's something I super enjoy teaching. So, Colleen and Elspeth, if you keep an eye out for that, that's something you will see.
Um, Fantastic. And looks like Elspeth's excited. um, so I didn't think there was a deck that was more direct than the tarot, but the Lenormand is definitely very sharp.
Same.
I would say Kipper is also
Kipper's
very,
wonderful. I love Kipper.
um, and that's
So
a German deck. So
it's almost identical to Lenormand in terms of how it works. And let's see, I've got my Kipper deck over here.
yeah, I left mine at home.
And reach. That's not Kipper.
And so here, Colleen, you were asking about what deck we might recommend. As far as Lenormand, I like the Bluebird Lenormand deck, simply because it has poetry on it. So I guess, and I'm like a what do you call a person who's obsessed with words? I forget what that's called. There it is, the Kipper deck. Um, so that deck, if you're interested in Kipper, I think is great. I haven't actually seen any other Kipper decks. I'm sure they're out there,
I have not.
but that's the only one I've been privy to.
This
Which one?
one's this is my favorite Lenormand. This is Pixie's Astounding Lenormand, and Pixie was the nickname for Pamela Coleman Smith.
Oh,
And so what they do is they have extracted images from different parts of the Pamela Coleman Smith Rider-Waite and made Lenormand cards out of them.
very cool.
So it's some familiar imagery. Whoops, this way. For some of the different and similar color schemes. So I use that one quite a bit. And then we have got Lenormand mats that we use. And I haven't seen anyone else use the mats the way that we do. So that's another thing I'll be teaching there. But I really like Lenormand. It's just super clear, super direct, and I can get strong answers that sometimes are evasive in tarot. Tarot is very much about the energy around this situation is this,
Right.
the energy around this situation is this. Lenormand's like one of your friends is an asshole. Find out who it is.
Yeah. There's the snake in the grass. Here you
There's
go.
the
Right
snake
here.
in the grass. Lenormand does not like mice, snakes, or foxes at all.
No, I hadn't. Oh, go ahead.
No, that's it.
Elspeth is mentioning some of her favorite decks. So the Way of the Cartouche, the Murray Hope, or is that Murray Hope maybe the author? I learned a long time ago, only ask once, it gets cranky. Oh, so I love this. Thank you for mentioning that, Elspeth. I almost called you Lenormand. The decks do have personalities for sure. One's like my Rider-Waite versus Katrina's Rider-Waite, they will have different personalities even within the same system. So I love that you brought up the personality of the decks because it's so important and it speaks to your relationship with the deck itself to be able to discern like, okay, this deck is great for this kind of question, or this deck is not going to put up with my nonsense. And even still, what I like to teach in my tarot card class, it's like tarot and oracle, is combining them, because that's what I found is very helpful. So where, like Katrina said, where the story stops short in my Rider-Waite deck, I add Kipper and Lenormand to say, what else is there and where that energy's headed and who's involved. And then more recently, I think I'm probably gonna have to put a cap on how many decks I actually use, because I was like, let me throw in the Feather Oracle. It's a message of hope. And I'm like, I am never gonna get to the point if, if I start adding all these decks. So yeah, they definitely have personality.
Jim, yes, and AJ, I do use the Kipper sometimes on watch. It's one I throw in there from time to time. So how many decks do you have, Dahlia?
Oh my God, I refuse to count them. It's worse than my Crystal Skull collection. It's so bad. I can tell you that I have several drawers that can hold at least maybe 20 decks at a time. So it's bad. I'm in a group.
A recovery group or a recovery group or a tarot group?
Yeah, I would say recovery because, I end up, to my own credit here, I do end up giving some of them away. So I'll just throw that in there. But it's bad. Like I'm surrounded by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 decks right now. And you can't see them.
Oh, I've probably got 60 or 70 just behind me.
Right.
And that's only part of my collection. speaking of collections, one of the things that I love, we talked about how creative people have gotten with the different decks.
Mhm.
Just within the last 5 or 6 years, I would say, uh, I want to say it's US Games and Llewellyn that have been kind of expanding the Rider Waite so that you get different perspectives. And I want to show you an example of that. So remember, this is what the Magician looks like. There's a deck called the After Tarot
Hmm.
that shows what happened in the next frame.
Oh, I love that.
So it's showing you that he's moving the magic and now his tools are sort of levitating.
Very cool.
So when we look at the Fool card, which is the typical Fool card
Oh,
here.
everybody wants to know what happens after the Fool because he's right on the ledge.
Whoops, wrong. There's the back.
Oh, I
Here,
thought that was the top of a coffin. I was like,
nope, nope. Here he is.
oh.
So this shows in each of the 78 cards what happened next. So that's the After Tarot. There's also the Before Tarot that
What?
shows the frame right before. There is the In Between Tarot,
What?
which melds the two together into its own card. And then there's my favorite, which is the Tarot of New Vision. I want to see if I've got it handy. I use that one quite a bit, actually.
Oh, now I'm going to hop on wherever I can get them.
I'm not seeing it right away, but
can you imagine?
Tarot of New Vision shows you what this looks like from the back. So you're looking at what they're looking at. With the Eight of Cups, you're looking at what he's walking away from. And so those together all give this complicated, nuanced, additional layers of information to the Rider Waite. And it's a really beautiful addition to the thought because it's using the exact same pictures from a different perspective. And I love them.
Right. Can you imagine that reading? It's like, I mean, you don't even have to do the interpretation and just lay them in front of the person and be like, so it's not looking good. And that's it. Reading over 5 minutes.
Yeah. So I thought that those came out right when I thought there was nothing new under the sun. I'd seen the round tarot, like the Mother Peace tarot. I had seen different oracle cards. I had seen ones that incorporate everything from runes to I Ching to astrology into their framework. But I thought that was just so unique and amazing that they would take the old pictures and look at them in different ways.
Do you know, are they made by the same person?
Not all of them, no. So you talk for a minute. I'm going to look for that other deck, okay?
Okay, well, what can we do here, guys? So, along with sort of the traditional tarot that is 78 cards, and Katrina's looking for those, we have tarot decks or so-called tarot decks like this one. When I first started learning tarot, this was a little annoying and confusing. It's a nice deck. I have nothing to say about John Holland personally, but this is a 65 card deck instead of 78. So then my obsessive brain is like, okay, well, what's missing? And, is it really a tarot deck? And it does say oracle on the top. I think that as far as tarot and oracle cards for me are a great introspective tool for sort of the, like tarot is the physical body and oracle cards would be the aura. Like, what is the essence of what's going on? And I find that's not true. If I'm doing a group read, oracle cards are great. But if I need details for a specific person to be able to be useful, I can't really get behind oracle cards by themselves. And that's, I may be unique to that. They just don't speak to me. Probably because I have too many questions. I'm like, all right, well, yeah, you said shadow, but like, what the butt? Like, what is this? Tell me more. So I don't know. That's how I feel.
Gladys and I use Oracle all the time
Yeah.
in our watch broadcasts. And the reason is, and this is how she and I have, because we've had long discussions about what the difference is. And for us, the tarot, yes, it's about the tarot itself conveying a specific message. So it's talking about the energy around a situation, and you're learning very specific interpretations, not just the classics, but your own as well, and continually ascribing that theme to each card. Whereas with Oracle, it was never meant to be the message.
Right.
Oracle cards are meant to stimulate a response in you
Mm.
so that it opens a door in you to have an intuitive download based on a bullet statement or a word or an image. So when you, for instance, with shadow, that is meant to unlock an idea in your head of how the word shadow applies to what you're asking about.
Right.
And so it stimulates your intuitives more so than the tarot does, although it certainly helps to be intuitive with the tarot. But it stimulates you to come up with the application of the card rather than the card itself doing all the heavy lifting.
Right. And I think it's important to recognize with that sort of intuitive opening the importance of, you know, choosing themes that resonate. So Elspeth was talking about the way of the cartouche. So that's
Mm-hmm.
probably Egyptian. I think she might have
I
even
would
said,
think, yeah.
and so she may have a lot of resonance with that. So she could perhaps get a tarot deck, get an oracle deck, find the Lenormand that's Egyptian theme, and find a lot of resonance throughout those. I've never, unfortunately, I've never resonated with John Holland's deck. But then there are others that have a lot of, I love artwork. And so, like the Sacred
That's a
Earth
nice one.
is a really nice one. The pictures are just gorgeous, and you can find something in every ounce of the imagery, and something always stands out, even if it says like that said center. And one thing I will say I do like about Oracle cards is a lot of the creators get really interesting in the booklets,
Mm-hmm. They
and
do.
like Elena Fairchild will often put like rituals and things in her books. If you're not used to sort of doing your own thing, or you need direction when it comes to ritual work for yourself, or cleansing work, or you want to do a mantra or something like that, she's fantastic, Elena Fairchild.
So when we're talking about Tarot of the New Vision, as a reminder, this is what the Fool looks like. And in Tarot of New Vision, this is what the Fool looks like.
Oh,
So
he's from
it's okay. So this is what the Magician looks like. This is what the Magician looks like in New Vision. He's got a monkey behind him, and he's looking out at the people that are watching him.
So what's interesting about that is the interpretation of the magician in reverse is that you're being duped. You
Mm-hmm.
are being tricked. And so I love the possibility, and I don't know if the cards are all the same size or what have you, but I love the possibility of getting like the magician here and being like, "Oh yeah, you have all the tools you need." And then like right after you slap down Tarot of the New Vision, you're like, wait a minute, like everything may not be on the up and up.
Right. And so the Two of Swords, for instance, where you see a blindfolded woman balancing two swords with the ocean behind her, this is what it looks like.
Is she
If
naked?
no,
Oh,
that's just her wrap around her.
okay. And there's
Yeah.
a horse
So,
coming.
and there's a
Interesting.
horse coming. So interesting stuff. So what I want to know now, you mentioned John Holland. Admittedly, I am also not a fan. I have a couple of his decks. I do use them, but I've got to say they're not my favorites.
Yeah.
I enjoy some of Colette Baron Reed's work, but I don't love all of them.
Mm.
And I don't think there's anybody, maybe Brian Froud, that I have liked everything that they've done. It's usually kind of hit or miss for me as far as loving a deck or not loving a deck. How do you choose a deck when you're picking your own? Uh,
In the beginning, it was all colors for me, and shapes. So if I could get behind the picture, what was positioned in the picture, and where and how, and I could tell a story just based on maybe the first three cards that I could pull, then I was like, okay, I can definitely connect with this. I want to give more to that, to say, I might have had experiences through my hands, and just some sort of knowing that, um, that this was the one, or the one of many. But it was very basic. I mean, I was very childlike about the whole thing. This is really pretty,
mhm.
and opening the deck and looking at the images would move me to a thought or an emotion, and that's basically how it was. I don't have probably a favorite, but I will say consistently Elena Fairchild. Like, she partners with great artists. Her work is consistent, in terms of, like, I do feel like Colette Baron Reed is awesome, but I feel like sometimes there's repeat messages.
Yes.
I do not get that from Elena Fairchild. And she, newly found, for me, she honors the tradition of her deck. So, like, she has one that incorporates a lot of different deities in it, from like Mexico and like South America, and she puts in the proper pronunciations. She's not out here telling you, like, oh, well, this is what you are, but she brings in the embodiments of those things, and really encourages honoring it as something that may not be a part of you, but you don't have to appropriate, like it. That's what I'm trying to say. It doesn't seem like she's trying to
Mhm.
appropriate traditions in her decks. So,
One thing I do want to point out that I hear at least once a week in the store that's really troubling are people who are told and believe with no basis, no reason, that you cannot buy your own deck of cards or you can't buy your own first deck of cards, that it has to be a gift. That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. In fact, I had one mentor tell me that tarot decks are like noses. You should only ever pick your own. And so and no, you should be the one to choose your deck for that very reason that you were describing before. That just because you love a tarot deck doesn't mean your best friend is going to love it.
right,
And there's nothing sadder than having a deck that somebody you love gave to you, so you don't want to give it away or get rid of it, but it doesn't speak to you.
right.
And so it's very important that you do choose your own tarot decks. And not that you can't say, hey, this is on my wish list. I'd really like to get this. But um, definitely choose your own, buy your own. I would say that I've purchased probably 98% of my own tarot decks.
I would say the same.
At least. And then some of the ones now, for instance, there's been times that Colleen has given me tarot decks, and all the ones she's given me vibed with me really well, but also Colleen knows me really well. She knows
Mm,
what I'm going to respond to. She knows what I love. And so, I really am not a fan of tarot as a gift unless the person has specifically said, I would like to have that deck.
yeah, yeah, agreed. I think that this is where it gets really interesting when you try to combine, like, Western methodology with ancient, prescriptions, or ways that, traditions and ways that people did things. I know in the I don't know, but I came across information, that was the tradition in the Romanian culture. So you had families that had decks from, handed down from,
Mhm.
grandmothers and great grandmothers and people like that, to the special person in the family line. Or, you had, not just Romanians but other traditions, and that's why they did that. But again, Western methodology, if you are in a family where they shun that sort of thing, and you're caught up and worried that like you're going to buy your first deck. First of all, I don't know about you, but I've never heard the consequences of buying your own deck when you're not supposed to, right?
I've
Like,
never heard the consequences of any of this shit. Now, when we're talking about the Romani people and those particular cultures, they have one type of deck
right,
that's being handed down. They don't have thousands to choose from.
right,
And during the time that was something that was done, your deck that you got from your grandma was going to look like the same deck your friend got from their grandma. So it's very different in terms of what's being you can't take those rules and apply them to what we're doing here.
right. I mean, and it's the exact same thing with anything that does not come from these United States. You can't take meditation that's done in a Tibetan or a Buddhist temple and expect yourself to be able to achieve what they can. You cannot do yoga from India and in the Hindu practice and expect to be able to, drink beer and have goats jumping around you so that you can achieve enlightenment. Like, it just doesn't work that way. You cannot. I mean, let me refrain from saying you cannot. You can combine them, but you're not going to get the results you thought. You're going to make your own deal, and if it makes you happy, then that's fantastic.
Now,
um,
one of the things I would say, there's two things. One is that when people start getting really involved with any type of system of card reading, there are people who will get very um, addicted to it, and they're
mm,
not able to make decisions unless they can consult their deck. And I
yep.
just had a conversation with a really dear friend of mine about that, saying, maybe you need to give the cards a rest so that you can use your own critical thinking and continue your strategy skills rather than needing to ask the cards about every little thing.
Yeah.
And I see that happen a lot in people. Another trend that I don't like that I see happening is people who exclusively or primarily read about other people. And
Yeah.
I don't like to spy on people with my cards who are not in the room. Find out what he thinks of me, find out what she's doing, find out what if she's having sex with him, find out if she's going to be moving away. I don't like reading about people who aren't in the conversation. I will read about how their actions affect the person who is there with me.
Right.
But I don't like to spy on people. And when we're talking about jumping into another real quick subject, what you mentioned about what are the consequences? What are the consequences if you don't shuffle your cards a particular way? What are the consequences if you allow someone else to touch your cards? If you don't keep your cards in a pine box or a silk scarf? Your cards will tell you exactly how they want to be treated.
Yeah.
And you
I,
set up your relationship with the cards.
I have a deck. It is the Orisha Tarot, and that particular deck, in its creation, the author talks about never wearing black when you read for that deck, and never taking it out of the room where you're reading it. It's been a minute since I've used this deck, so that's why I'm stammering. Because there were so many rules that I felt like I couldn't use the deck. I was
Well,
like,
and like you were saying, or what?
yeah.
What is the great thing that's going to happen? When Eric and I developed Cusp, which is the spiritual system that we use, that we've been using for around 26 years, we got attacked because in a cusp circle, we move the energy counterclockwise, because
Mm,
that is the way energy naturally moves in the natural world. And so we wanted it to be magic, to be a natural process. And everybody was just, you can't do that. One leader said, that's like giving a baby a gun if you teach newcomers how to do that. And, you're going to cause all kinds of bad things. Well, And I just kept asking, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
You literally made this shit up, and you want me to subscribe to it, or you believe it from somebody who made that shit up. And it's the same thing with cards. There are all kinds of traditions about cards, which are lovely, but there's nothing that says specific rules about how you manage your cards except one thing, and that is don't read for minors without their parents' permission.
Oh yeah.
That's the only thing I would say is a hard and fast rule. You've got to do what feels right to you.
Right. And that will vary from reader to reader, person to person, and experience to experience. I think that it's probably safe to do some experimentation when it comes to some of these rules. Like if you don't shuffle the cards, what kind of answers are you going to get? I mean, it makes you a great scientist
Mm-hmm.
to ask the questions that are hard to get answers for. So what happens if you don't shuffle? What if you just keep pulling, the same cards? What kind of answers are you going to get? What happens if you know you read on a funky day? Like for me, I had to figure out, and it took a long time, why I like full moons. Reading on full moons are terrible for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a personal thing. It would never be something that I would go out and teach. But I think what we're speaking to in this moment with all these rules are people that sort of over prescribe personal experiences as
Mm-hmm.
what other people will go through.
And they extend that to magic. Like, don't put out the candles in this order. You have to do a ritual in this order. Everybody wants to live in this tight little box of how they do things.
Yeah. And there may be 5 people that works for, not 100. So it's definitely it's just, all I can ever say is it's interesting what you start to hear, what comes out. And that's the next question is, well, what if, like, maybe that's our, like, the inner indigo child in me and Katrina, like, but what if I did press the button, like, what
Right.
happened? And
Yeah.
then we press the button.
Yeah. We're the ones that are going to go take the fall for everybody else to find out. And here's what I can tell you. If there is a rule to be broken in this, between Dahlia and I, we busted right through all of them. And the emperor has no clothes on. It's really okay.
Yeah.
We've done it. We've screwed up everything you can screw up. One of the questions, though, and I think I know your answer on this. I think we are different in this respect. Is
Mm,
reading reversals. There are some readers who, with tarot specifically, because you don't read reversals in Lenormand,
nope.
but
Oh,
if
thought
the
about
card is upside down, it has a different interpretation. And I can do that. And I do know those and I do work those. But most of the time, I read totally upright.
I I'm afraid of giving too positive of a reading. I'd like
Mm-hmm.
there are some pretty stern answers in the tarot reading upright. Like, the tower is the tower. Um, the 5 of cups is the 5 of cups. But I know myself, and I could bright side the shit out of anything. So I'm like, okay, well, you know what? Just give it to me straight. Let me just shuffle these up, allow for some reversals. And then again, this is why I love bringing in the Kipper and the Lenormand, because there is no sugarcoat. And when I see that snake, I'm like, all right, well,
Yep, there it is.
you had the 10 of Pentacles, but then, the snake was there. So I'm sorry, like, you're going to get robbed. So, as far as reversals, I love them. And they come out as amplifications or the opposite energy, and that is dependent on what else is there. Like, I won't read a reversal. I won't do a 1 card pull with just a reversal. We're going to need some more answers. Um, and what I hate is when there's like 6 reversals in a row and a person is asking me something really hopeful, and I'm like, well, what I can say without a shadow of a doubt is there are at least delays involved. And then we go on to ascertain more details from there. So I definitely love reversals, just because it keeps me from being too sunny. So
So I think we've covered an awful lot about tarot and Lenormand. We didn't go as much into oracle cards, but oracle cards are very simple. There's no it's a matter of this card means this, and what
Yep.
does that mean to you is always the next question. Oracle cards will usually have the little book that comes along with them that tells you what the artist idea was behind that card, but really it's about what it spurs in you. Whereas Lenormand and Tarot tend to start out with a basis of this is what this card means and work from there, whereas oracles do not.
And oracles, I don't know about you, Katrina, but oracles tend to be very wordy.
Oh
Uh,
God, they're Gabby. They are.
so, I mean, you're either going to get one word that's super vague, or you're going to get, the paragraph on the back.
Mhm.
But yeah, less direct, I think. So, but we could, like Katrina was saying, there could be a whole 2-hour class on this, maybe 3. So, but awesome that you're going to be teaching this online, at least the Lenormand. I'm sure Tarot will show up too. I bought Katrina's tarot book, Tarot for Everyone,
Tarot for real people.
Tarot for Real People. I do have it. I just forgot the title. And it's a great book. I actually recommend it as a beginner book for most people that are willing to read. That's the other thing. You have to want to read. And it's not a hard read at all. But keep a lookout for those classes, guys. This topic is endless. If you liked what we had to say and you want to see a part 2, or you have some more questions about it, please drop that in the comments. Let us know. We'll see them after for sure if you're catching us on the replay. But other than that, I think we have a segue into the first whole week of September next week.
Mhm.
So until next time, guys, on Crossroads of Cognizance. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.